Greetings once again, everyone. This is the Enterprise Edge podcast, and this is Mark Vigoroso, founder and CEO of the Enterprise Edge. I am thrilled to be with you on a Friday in mid-December. I am joined by Peter Bailis, CTO at Workday. I'm very happy to have him with us today. It's been a trick to coordinate calendars, but I am thrilled to have him before the year closes out, and this will, in fact, be the final Enterprise Edge podcast of calendar year 2025. So we intend to end with a flourish, which is what we will do. But before we jump in, let's give Peter a proper welcome. Peter, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and delighted to close out the year, hopefully on a high note.
That's right. That's right. We'll give him something to talk about over the holidays. Well, great. Well, guys, thanks for joining us, guys and gals. We will have a very short period of icebreakers, get to know Peter a little bit, and then dive into the matters at hand with regards to what Workday is doing and some of the areas where they're leading from an innovation and product development perspective. And then we'll end with a speed round, a little bit of fun before we wish everybody a happy and healthy holiday season. So let's get started. So from a icebreaker perspective, I've done a little bit of research on Peter here, and Peter, I think you're based in the obviously San Francisco area. I think you have some pedigree with Stanford. I think you earned your PhD at Stanford. Is that right?
I taught at Stanford for a few
Okay.
years as faculty. I
Oh, as
was on the
faculty
other side of the rivalry actually for grad school at Cal.
at Cal. Gotcha. So you've had some academic experience in some of the highest sort of call it technology inclined learning institutions, at least in our country. And and now you're leading technology thought and execution at Workday, which is one of the sort of the success stories in the modern age when it comes to enterprise applications and the rapid evolution of enterprise apps in the AI era. And I'm curious, when you think about that juxtaposition, you think about your academic experience, excuse me, and you think about now your sort of corporate experience. What are some things that you've learned in the belly of Workday that academia didn't or couldn't prepare you for?
Well, there's a lot different between academia and enterprise software like Workday.
Yeah.
But I think the core commonality for me is the centrality of data. I
Mm,
used to do a lot of research in data management and systems for
mm,
machine learning centered around data. And
mm,
what I've been pleasantly surprised to learn coming to Workday just about 7 months ago is, Workday is kind of like a big database, and
mm,
it's got all the data around people and money for 11,000 customers worldwide.
mm,
And the magic is being able to govern and manage that data really well, and then also run the transactions on top of that data. And what's funny about the transactions is that almost every application today has a database behind it. And the transactions on top of the Workday database are the ones that like literally define what work means. Like whether I'm approved to take time off or not, or where my work location is, or who my manager is. Like it's the system of record. And it's very interesting to be inside of a system of record for such huge enterprise scale. And I think
mm,
that the just magnitude of impact that you can have at that scale is one thing to read about in a textbook or to teach in, introduction to databases or even grad databases. Very different
yeah.
to see, like you've got your whole world in your hands, right? When you've got that database of people and money, it's a super,
Mm,
super important data set to keep pristine and
yeah.
also to build on top of.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the research that you've done or been involved with around data. And I think databases, but also what's been called distributed systems, if I'm not mistaken.
hmm
Um, and I'm curious, what would you give as maybe a couple sentence explanation of what's the significance or importance of distributed systems?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of my favorite descriptions of what a distributed system is by someone who won the Turing Award in distributed systems, Leslie Lamport, and his
Mm,
definition of a distributed system is a system in which the failure of a computer you didn't even know about can render the entire system inoperable.
mm,
So
mm,
when you think about building software, distributed systems are a special type of software where the two hard problems to solve are failures
mm,
and then communication latency, like how long it takes
mm,
to talk. And it turns out that, you know, especially as programmers and engineers, right? Like we think about the world in very synchronous terms. We experience it in, you know, live full feed format responding to the real world. And suddenly when you write programs where they may not hear back for a long time or they may not hear back ever if another node is down, how do you make systems that are resilient to that type of behavior and know how to tell the
mm,
difference between a failure and between communication latency? It's really hard. And it's kind of incredible that these are real problems that happen all over the world, billions of times a day, messages being
mm,
delayed or dropped, and a lot of times servers go down. And the fact that software runs as well as it does today is kind of a
mm,
testament to the fact that the distributed systems concepts on how to layer over that and build abstractions on top of those, sort of unreliable networks, unreliable machines. It's sort of a marvel of modern engineering.
mm. Oh, that's fascinating. Well, it's maybe we'll use that as our segue into some of the business oriented questions, but I think we could certainly spend hours on that alone. But there's this idea that um, and I think you've done some work in this area as well, Peter, around the idea of compound AI systems where you have multiple sort of components, right? To try to simplify this, right? You've got multiple AI components that are interoperating, they're working together rather than sort of a single monolith. And and I mean, or from my seat, I'm working with a lot of different enterprise software companies, and they're at various stages of developing and innovating and creating products in this era. And and I believe, and you can keep me honest here, Peter, at Workday, I think you guys have made a decision early on to sort of architect compound AI systems that certainly talking about HCM, human capital and finance type workflows, right? But compound systems that rely on multiple interrelated components rather than sort of a single sort of monolithic model. So first I want to test that and make sure, is that supposition correct? Would you say, is that maybe an oversimplified version of the approach that you guys are taking?
I think it's really well put. And the
Okay.
reason for this kind of compound approach is that, models are really good when you give them very specific instructions. They've
Mm-hmm.
gotten much better in terms of what you call technical terms, sound funny, instruction following in the
Yes.
last, couple years. But
Yep.
the complexity of the instructions any model or any, LLM call can really follow is getting way better, but it's still
Mm,
relatively small. So when you
mm,
want to go and build a complex system for automating something like payroll
mm,
or making something like scanning the contracts I've got and figuring out payment terms, it's really hard to do that with one single model or single prompt. And
yeah.
what you see in a lot of the systems, including ones that we build, is you're kind of giving a model or what you might call an agent access to a bunch of individual tools it can call. So in the
Mm,
case of, say, our contract intelligence agent, I might have something to go and scan the PDF. I might have a
mm,
special tool to go and read a table because it's really hard to read tables, it turns out, even with modern
mm,
models. I want to have one
mm,
to access my database of contracts, and I want to have one to do a redlining, so to redline this. And the first
mm,
four are kind of traditional, almost like deterministic, scan
mm,
this PDF, give me the text back.
mm,
The redlining one though, that doesn't sound like a simple calculator. And what you actually see in many cases, the tools themselves are also
mm,
models. And so if you
mm,
unpack, the full tree essentially of what one of these agents is made of, often it's made
mm,
of other agents. And
mm,
even today, the best models, you really can only handle a handful of tools at a time. So the only way to scale the task complexity is to essentially introduce hierarchy, which is one form of a compound system.
mm. No, it's fascinating. I wonder if we can. Well, let's do this. If you think about the actual domain that you think about, probably most of your days now is given where Workday is sort of the finance and HR realm, right? So in this world of the CFO, there's a lot of requirements that I think exist in those offices that have to do with transparency and auditability, behaviors that are very deterministic, you might say. There's not a lot of margin for creativity or error, if you will, or subjectivity when you're dealing with things like payroll, right? Or money, right? Money changing hands. There's not a lot of you know, margin for error. And so when you think about the fact that AI, a lot of the models are probabilistic, and you're trying to apply value proposition to very deterministic environments, how do you reconcile that when you're building solutions, right? When you're trying to apply this rapidly evolving technology category to a highly deterministic environment, very little margin for error. Is that something that, I mean, it's probably a lot of what you grapple with, but I'm curious your perspective on that. And maybe there is a simple way that you think about it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
This is one of the hardest parts about building AI for people and money is that
Yeah.
unlike a web search where even a lot of times the right answer, what's the best web page to go and show you, it's
Yeah.
completely subjective. Here, I'm going to close my books. They better be correct, or I'm going to go and, make a employee, data change that better be correct. That's someone's livelihood, right? And
Yeah.
ultimately, that trust is also kind of core to who Workday is. We started,
Mm.
20 years ago, the radical idea you should run your HR and finance software in the cloud, starting with
Yeah.
HR. And that was radical. People were like, I need to have an escrowed version of the source code. It was like so
Yeah.
heretical. So trust was a big deal and still is a big deal for us in terms of
Mm.
why our customers choose Workday. So when you build
Mm.
AI, how do you work around that where these models are not perfect and
Mm.
they ultimately, are operating domains where they need to be right? I think there's really two
Mm.
key things that we focus on. One is we couple the models with the core business processes inside of the platform. So when I want to run payroll, for example, there is a payroll process. And what payroll means at my company is defined by my company. It's configured. It's very specific. And a lot of the AI comes down to how do I make it easier to, understand which business processes to run in the first place? And second, how do I go and orchestrate them? So
Mm.
composing and combining many of these. And so when you look at what we've done in payroll as an example, you're essentially allowing a payroll administrator to go and perform bulk actions and go and run their payroll and go and make, say, minimum wage compliance related changes very quickly. But they're
Mm.
still in control. And the core substrate is really still running those core business processes that are deterministic. And you can think about the,
Mm.
the job of the agent to go make it
Yep.
easier to get to that outcome faster, but leaving the human
Mm.
in control. The other part about this that I think is really interesting is we spend a lot of time, even just on the compliance side. So when you have a lot of take financial audit, for example, a lot of folks, you'll hire an audit firm to go run an audit once a year and they look at a handful of records and then they're done. Well, the test that an auditor would run, you can actually start to, create deterministic versions of those that run all of the time. And if you can combine that with agentic logic that determines what tests to run and when, and
Mm.
then takes those test results and can give you a synthesized explanation of what's going on to avoid the equivalent of kind of like alert fatigue, but for an accountant. That's like a
Yeah.
really powerful solution. And
Mm.
you're kind of unlocking this use case where who wouldn't want to have an audit every single day of the year from a financial
Mm.
compliance perspective? It was just cost, prohibitive to do so otherwise. And with an
Right.
agent, I do have that audit. I can run it literally anytime I want, and I have
Right.
an agent going and interpreting those results and making sure that I understand what could be a torrent of audit results coming back, and help me prioritize the ones that matter.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I mean, I think we are seeing I mean, you just nailed one of the use cases that I think I'm seeing in a lot of different forms, which is decisions have been made historically to do things or not do things based on the level of effort and level of return, right? I mean, whether or not you realize it, I think most business people make cost benefit decisions all the time, almost without knowing it, right? And that logic, people are trained to do. And what I'm finding is that, in a good way, companies are able to, and people sort of unwind some of the presuppositions about cost, right? To your point, well, we would never do that because it takes too much time, effort, money, resources, and therefore we're just living with the result, which is we only get that particular output once a quarter. It's like, well, what if we were to challenge all of those underlying assumptions and say, with agentic, you can do that with minimal cost, minimal effort, right? It's like, oh, okay. Then that means we could get this particular report or outcome or framework every week. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? And it creates a sort of cascade of almost like new white space where you can say, okay, well, what would that enable us to do? What value would that create? And that's where these sort of ROI, some of the ROI models that when I talk to end users and companies that are actually trying to implement and scale AI, they're not often thinking about the ROI in all of those multiple cascading effects, right? What did you just unlock by being able to perform this audit flow or whatever on a weekly basis instead of a quarterly basis? What does that mean to you financially? And they don't always logically just come up with this, well, here are the 17 layers of value. It's often understated. And I think it's fascinating because in the world of finance, it has been so labor intensive for so many decades that what you guys are doing, and maybe this is a question, and under a roundabout way of asking the question is are you helping your finance stakeholders see some of that value that might accrue in areas that might not be readily evident right away, or are they seeing it on their own? Or how are they thinking about ROI in the first place? Maybe that's an easier way to ask the
Yeah,
question.
it's a great,
So,
I think I'd say as an industry,
yeah.
except in very select domains, most
Mm,
folks are figuring out how do I actually get any ROI from AI.
yeah.
And the arc I think we're on is people saw this happen in, ChatGPT in the consumer era, and it's
Yeah.
incredible for knowledge search and public information retrieval. And these models are trained on the public internet and can't or every book, can answer any question. And then
Yeah.
you bring it to work, and like there's a massive fall off because these models know nothing about my data.
Yeah.
Um, they're not super good at a lot of back office tasks or knowledge work tasks. There's a recent benchmark that came out this past week looking at even just basic, data manipulation and back off, like what a knowledge work would look like. And these models are so,
Mm,
so early there, even the frontier models. And then I think what a lot of people actually built from a market perspective was just like simple prompt wrappers, and it was not very sophisticated, and the results were, as a result, not great either.
yeah.
So, what do, right? Our approach is really simple. We look at the core functions that we serve across people and money. So, for
Mm,
example, in finance, you've got a planning department, and there's a bunch of
yep.
people in FP&A. You say, what do they
Yep.
spend all their time doing today? And okay, they do a ton of work, running different types of analyses and building forecasts and doing sensitivity, analysis and scenario planning. And what we basically do
Yeah.
is we look at those like the day in the life, and we say,
Mm,
okay, we own the business process for this, for say a scenario plan. If we took that business process and the core data inputs, and then the core, business processes we have built in to run a say a scenario, how do I go and make that way easier to go and set up, way easier to go and scale, and
yep.
in the case where there's a compliance angle, just easier to drive more correct results. And what that ends up doing is, for those FP&A folks who are just spending tons and tons of time in spreadsheets building out scenarios or are, data modeling, they are actually freed up to do a lot more work, right? And so
Mm,
the types of ROI that we see, which we work a lot with with our customers, you get a 30% reduction in time doing manual analysis. it's not like that FP&A professional is just, kick back and, hang out in the break room. They're actually spending more time on what they can uniquely do, which is thinking about strategy versus building yet another, scenario breakout or tweaking another parameter in a model. And that's where I think the bull case is on at least AI for work. We kind of fit the work we can do into the hours in the day. There's always more work to do, and you take a business process lens on this and you say we're going to automate the business processes or major parts of those business processes, you actually
Mm,
free up the parts that are less mechanical and much
mm.
more around what I think people are actually really good at, which is frankly bringing a lot more context that's not in the data to the
Yeah.
analysis. So for that scenario, the FP&A analyst is great at thinking about what are the scenarios I should run, and if they spend less time on actually building them out because the model is going and creating the scenarios on their behalf and they're interpreting the results, that's like net positive and ultimately leads to better
Mm.
decisions.
No, I love it. I love it. Well, it's a good bridge to the next thought here, which is which probably gets to a lot of decisions you're asked to make, you and your team, when you think about building product. And you said 11,000, right? You have 11,000 customers about, is
Mm-hmm.
that right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously a massive base of data, very sensitive data, right, around employees and finances, and very sensitive data, and the models are evolving very, very quickly. The sophistication of reasoning that's capable in some of these tools is improving rapidly. And so with that rapidly moving landscape, how do you think about decisions like intellectual property? Like, what should we be building as Workday, as opposed to what should we be maybe acquiring, right? Or maybe what we should be partnering to gain access to, right? It's classic build versus buy versus partner, right? Against a rapidly evolving and shifting landscape. And that's part of the probably the challenge and the thrill of your job, right?
Yeah.
But tell me how you're thinking through that, and how do you navigate that?
We always try to think about what are we best at and
Yep.
where do we want to maintain that edge. And for us,
Yep.
we're the system of record for people and money. And we also have a ton
Yep.
of context around how that's used. So it's not just the
Hmm.
database, but there's a trillion transactions that say, what does work mean for customer A versus B versus C? We build
Hmm.
all of our AI around that premise, and it's all our customers' data. So significant amount of work on responsible AI, data control, so on, so that it's really your data, your business. And when we think
Hmm.
about what do we build, I think there's enduring value in embedding the AI and infusing AI directly in that process model. And that's
Hmm.
why, we have a lot of great partners who will build on the Workday platform, and we're opening up more of the platform to make it easier to build on Workday with standard APIs. When you
Hmm.
really want to go deep, deep, deep into something like employee self-service, employee wants to take
Hmm.
time off, or employee,
Hmm.
or alternatively, on the case management side, I want to go help, HR specialists manage caseload better. Like that's just such a core part of our business. We have so much data around that it's, our right to win. And then by
Yeah.
embedding that AI so deeply and infusing it in the process, as the model to get better and more capable, then the whole flywheel just gets even better, right? Um,
Got it.
we have done a fair number of acquisitions this year. We've acquired Paradox, which is a frontline recruiting solution, which is really cool. Sana, which is an incredible knowledge management and learning platform.
Yep.
Flowwise, which is an agent builder. I think in each of these cases, it's really about, what lets us move faster towards our vision. Paradox, we know we want to do more on recruiting and AI for recruiting, and they're a close partner, and they were in many, many accounts, and they said, we love this. It's such an incredible platform. Awesome. For Sana, really incredible user experience, leapfrog experience for our users that we'll be bringing to the Workday platform, which is an area we get a lot of feedback on. And this is an area where we can just have Scandinavian design ethos infused into the Workday platform and bring it to everyone. Very excited
Yep.
about that. And on partners, I think Workday's historically been very closed as an ecosystem, owing to its roots where going to the cloud was heretical, right? Now that we're in a world where we're part of a constellation of SaaS providers, AI tools depend on other AI tools, and really, it's we want to pull together data from many different places. We want to make it so you can get access to your Workday data while applying that, security and governance model. So we're actually investing heavily, heavily in an open ecosystem using open standards applied in our governance model. And we've actually seen the number of people building on Workday, both from a developer population perspective and just from partners building businesses on Workday, like meaningful scaled businesses, has gone up a
Yeah.
bunch as well. So it's all about the core. It's like we'll
Yeah.
be the center for people, money, the transactions around those, and we'll try to give you the best agents for people and money. But if you want to build your own or use the partners, that's great too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, even though the landscape is different, I mean, the logic that you have always applied to the classic build by partner decisions is the same, right? Stick to what makes you you, stick to what makes you different, and stick to what makes you, who you are and who you've been. And I think it still applies, even if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly. I think
Hmm.
that's good wisdom. Um, Well, great. Well, Peter, this is awesome, and like I told you, it's going to go fast, and it did. But we're not done yet. We're not done yet. We're gonna have a little bit of fun with a speed round, and we're gonna ask hopefully very simple questions, and we're gonna learn a bit about you as well. Um, all right, let's see if we can get through 5 of them. All right, first one. So you've most likely participated in, or maybe even hired some engineers yourself. What is the one question in an interview that tells you more about a candidate than their entire resume?
I think asking someone to walk through a recent technical problem they've solved end to end tells you
Hmm.
tons, and it usually makes for a very fun conversation. You can make that a 3 hour interview if you want to. Not
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I've gone that long, but
yeah,
it's very interesting because you get a sense of where do they start answering that question? How do they talk about the customers that they're working with? How do they talk about the challenges they have? It's an incredible jumping off, and I think on surface level, it's kind of a very easy question to answer, but it actually contains multitudes when you really think about the many layers of it in terms
yeah,
of why did you do that and why did you do that? We talk about in postmortems like 5 whys. Why ask why once, ask why again, ask why again.
yeah,
I think that's like a great way to understand how an engineer thinks, and ultimately, what do they prioritize? What do they care about? And what kind of taste do they have in terms of making the inevitable hard decisions? Engineering is all about trade-offs. So how do they
yeah,
navigate trade-offs?
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, I had an interviewer once ask me. He knows who he is. I don't know if he's listening. He had me describe in great detail how I make a ham and cheese omelet,
Hmm.
and he asked me about another half dozen wacky questions like that. After the fact, he circled back and he told me exactly why, the logic and what he learned from how I described how I made an omelet, and it was mind blowing to me. So, beware if you ever get asked a question like that. They're listening very carefully to the words you say, the words you don't say, things like
Hmm.
that. So,
Exactly.
so anyway, let's see. If you could choose one technology or practice that you'd want to make mandatory across your team, or maybe broader than just your team, maybe the industry, that you think would um, move the needle on quality or speed or efficiency, or robustness in terms of the quality of the software. Is there anything that you've learned or you've experienced over time that just can't be missed in terms of a discipline in software development?
One thing I'm really bullish on that I think makes life better for everyone using software is embracing some of the new agentic protocols like MCP.
Ah, yes.
And I would love if every SaaS vendor had a great MCP coverage for their platform. It would make life way better for end users. And I think it's happening. But if I could wave a magic wand and have it happen tomorrow, that'd be incredible because the coverage is still not nearly where it needs to be for a lot of basic stuff that you'd want to do, crossing your CRM with your email, with your calendar. The models are getting almost good enough to do this type of stuff, and
Yeah.
it's not there yet.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. All right, let's see. When you think about the CFOs of the companies that you're working with, and maybe the HROs as well, um, if we fast forward 3 or 5 years or so, do you see these guys or gals? Are they going to evolve to be managing labor? If you think about labor in the most inclusive sense, right? Human labor and digital labor. right? Are they going to require different skills, expanded skills, augmented skills to manage this and sort of orchestrate labor across these sort of human and digital lines where you've got agents executing workflow? It's almost like you're auditing the performance of your human workforce and your digital workforce, just like you would, you know, in any kind of, workforce, full-time contract, whatever. Do you see that role as a leader, as an executive at these companies? Do you see them evolving at all? Is that a reach, or is that, is that really going to become the remit of these traditional sort of business leaders, that they're going to have digital labor that they're going to be accountable for?
I think it's very likely you have something like that. And
Yeah.
for no reason other than a lot of systems are set up for human access.
Mm,
I have a identity and I have permissions attached to that identity, and that's tied to my role and it's tied to my org chart and it's tied to a lot of elements of how people operate today. And actually, one of the things we've been working on at Workday is called the agent system of record, which is
mm,
just a very um, nice way to basically take the data model you have for people in Workday, and you
mm.
can now have an agent applied there as well. So an agent in your org chart, an agent with permissions, an agent with an ID, or an ID you
Yeah.
bring in, but you can embed there. And I think that's in some ways why agents are so powerful as a concept, because they sort of um, personify the AI. You're like, well,
Mm,
what should I do with this chat thing? It's like, how do I conceptualize that? Well, when I make it like a person, suddenly I can like think about how to wrap it in my organization. And the bet with
mm,
agent system of record is that, hey, we manage all the people. You can actually manage money with the same, or sorry, you can actually manage agents with the same data model. And
mm,
I think there's a high probability that concepts from there become really important in the future, because I don't want to have an agent execute with full system access. I want to have it execute with specific access. And the best way to govern access today is largely through, human-based identities or some evolution of a human-based identity over time.
got it. Got it. All right, two more, Peter. We'll let you go. But one is curious on this one. Workday. Speaking of what you're great at and what you've done and built a strong foundation around managing people and money, right? Is there a day in the future where that expands, right? If you think about adjacencies, natural adjacencies to that, right? Whether that's additional functional areas within your typical corporation that would make sense. I don't know, I'll throw one out, like maybe supply chain as an example. Um, is that even on the radar when you start to think about long range planning and growth? Or do you think this is pretty much, you guys have established what your identity is, basically looking at, HR and finance workflows and automation, pretty much in perpetuity? What any thoughts there?
I think we're just scratching the surface on people and money, to be candid, in
Yeah.
terms of even market share and
Yep.
the upside opportunity in these domains. So
Yep.
we'll never forget that core. But look,
Hmm.
customers really want a handful of solutions, and a lot of people come to
Hmm.
Workday and run both their people data and their money data and their planning, and then a range of other stuff like now their contract management solutions. Like they run, if Workday offers it, we have a great suite of products. People tend to adopt it. There's great attach across our customer base. So I would
Yeah.
not be
Yeah.
surprised if we do expand in the future. But again, it's a balance. Don't forget the
Yep.
core, and
Yep.
we're ambitious, right? We want to grow.
Yeah.
I think this is a great technology base to go and build off of. And frankly, I think that, there's not a lot of other people at our scale who I think have the, um, you know, one, scale, two, team, three, ambition to go as big as we are, especially when you think about those back office functions.
Yeah, for sure. No, got it. Got it. Got it. Last one, and then we'll part for the day. But I think this one's interesting because you think about Workday and the role that you're in. Um, Everybody likes to make comparisons. I think the human brain likes to compare. Everything is like something else, right? There's nothing that's really unique. And I'm curious, when people compare Workday to other providers in the market, whether they're SAP or Oracle or UKG or other platforms that are tackling HR and finance workflows, from your spot, are they asking the right questions when they're when somebody in sort of a buying group, whether it's a technical or a business buyer, they're trying to figure out how Workday solves their problems, distinctly different and valuable than maybe some alternatives. Are they asking the right questions? Are there questions that they're missing? Are there questions that you would advise them to ask to get to the heart of the true identity of Workday, both now and going forward, if you follow the question?
We have a great comparison set, and I think some great competitors.
Yeah,
The reality is, when you ask the question, where's the focus? The best solution for people and money really falls out. I mean, we
yeah,
really do have, when you look at our comparison set, the focus at scale that's pretty unmatched in these areas. And I
hmm,
think that comes out in the product and comes out in the platform and comes out in a lot of the big bets we're placing when you look at our AI strategy, when you look at what we're doing for frontline, when we look at what we're doing for, international and for medium enterprise. Like, it's kind of on all cylinders right now. And I think that focus, when you get a, you know, significant market cap, large scale revenue machine like Workday, moving and humming, um, we just have focus that our top competitors don't have on people and money. They're running, uh, I would call it hyperscalers, but they're running some form of a scaled, compute cloud. They're selling a lot of
yeah,
other parts of the business. It's like, and I think focus matters a lot. And at the end of the day, even at this scale, it all comes down to execution and building great
yeah.
products. And I think
That's
that,
right.
like, there's no substitute for focus and actually, building a quality product. And that's why I believe, and when I meet with our customers and prospects, like, I spend my fair bit of time in deals myself, right? That focus shows.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's phenomenal. That's a great way to land the planes. So much. Thank you so much, Peter. I enjoyed it. I would love to park a time in 2026, and we'll come back around for chapter 2 on this one. But I really do appreciate your time with us today and your willingness to share your views and perspectives. And it is quite a ride. Congratulations on the success, and there will be more, I'm sure, we will be hearing in 2026. But thank you so much, Peter. Thank you to everybody who's joined us this year on this road. We will be signing off for 2025. Peter is our anchor leg, and I think we did ourselves proud. So thank you again, and we wish everybody a happy holiday season, healthy holiday season, and we'll catch you in 2026 on the next episode of the Enterprise Edge. Thanks all.